Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Have a great day.
Hello, my name is Jenni M, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to put this over here. My sponsor also told me not to write notes, but I did it anyways. Is there anyone in here with under a year of sobriety? Can you raise your hand? Thank you. Welcome, welcome. My sobriety date is January 17th, 2015. My home group is the Desert Speakers Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet on Monday nights at 6:30 p.m. over there on Lincoln and 40th Street. So if you're ever in the hood, come and see us. I got jumped when I was 17, and I don't know, Harold reminded me of this. I got jumped and sent to the hospital, and dinner reminded me of this too. After I was at a party when I was 17, and there was a ton of people there, and I got jumped, and after regaining consciousness, my friends snuck me out the front door because there were like helicopters coming, and my friends from my high school started fighting the other high school, and it turned into a big mess, and I went to the hospital. And it was pretty traumatizing. The police were there. They were taking a report because the women that had jumped me were adults and I was a minor. And I remember just like kind of not really knowing what was going on. But I left the hospital and I went outside and there were like 20 of my friends there. And my whole growing up as a child, like, I didn't think anybody liked me at all. And I just remember coming out of this hospital room like, all these people are here to see me like that. It was so baffling. And then coming tonight to dinner and having friends show up for me for dinner tonight, and the fellowship that we have here in Alcoholics Anonymous that's so deep and so rich and so intimate is just something that when I was new, like, I saw it, but I didn't understand it. It was attractive to me, but I didn't know how to get it because I felt so icky on the inside from 20 years of drinking and drugging. So in Alcoholics Anonymous, we share what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now as a result of doing the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And really how I developed a relationship with the God of my understanding through that process. And I had a lot of old ideas about God when I was a young girl, deep down inside. Actually, I'm going to start with a reading because that kind of helps me get God in the room and remind me of the literature. So in Alcoholics Anonymous on page 55, it says, actually, before I start, Harold also reminded me of something because when I did get jumped, like I had 5 years later into my sobriety, I went to al-anon, another program, and I learned those 3 C's. I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I can't control it, but I did cause that other fight. And what I've learned about my alcoholism is that probably 8, 9.5 times out of 10, I did cause it. So back to this old ideas about God and how I grew up and what I was like. It says, actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other, it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. And when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was 33-ish, and I was an agnostic, and I had kind of lost a relationship with God. But if I look back, deep down inside, like when I was younger, like I did have a relationship with God. I did have communion with God. I did talk to God when I was little, but over the course of time, it was obscured by worship of other things, mainly alcohol, people, status, money, all the things, right? I grew up in, my grandparents were Lutheran, and my grandma would always tell me, I hope you can get baptized because then you can go to heaven with us. My mom was in a cult. She was, so she had very obscure ideas about trusting people in regards to God, or listening to people in regards to God. These people did a lot of things to her. They had this thing called the game where they would put her in the middle of a room and everybody would sit in a circle and kind of like take her inventory and just break her down. She was split up from her parents and shipped up to Oakland, California, where she took care of quote unquote crack babies. And so she had a lot of old ideas about God that I kind of inherited. And I grew up in a town called Yorba Linda, California, and that's in Orange County. It's in North Orange County. And this town had a long history of like temperance. And so there was always like this undertone of, alcohol wasn't always accepted where we're from here. And I would dabble in different ideas about God and attend Friends Christian Church in Yorba Linda, and this was founded by Quakers, and it was chartered by the Nixon family, the parents of Richard Nixon. And so this was very evangelist, and I had come to Jesus, and I'm going to Lutheran church with my grandparents, and I'm saying that might be the cult that my mom's talking about. And so I was a little bit mixed up about what my relationship with God was. But, at 14, I kind of, circumstance happens, and I just said, the family split up, people went their different ways, and at that point I just said, F it, I don't want to go to heaven anyways, and I took off, and from there I ended up just kind of going crazy, growing up in Southern California, like, there's this whole juxtapose where there's very wealthy families and there's very poor families and there's everything kind of in between, and so I'm growing up in this kind of upper middle class family. I'm in and out of high school. I drop out because I don't want to be institutionalized. And then I try to self-teach because I've learned all these old ideas that don't trust anybody, self-reliance, self-sufficiency will get me. Love is conditional. All these things had kind of set me up. So I took the reins of my life at a very early age and said, no one's going to be responsible for me except for me. And then, I'm going to school and a continuation school that has mobile homes and barbed wire fence along a train track. And I'm hanging out with Travis and a guy named Jimmy, and one day, Jimmy doesn't show up for school, and I'm like, Travis, where's Jimmy? And he's like, oh, he's in jail. And I'm like, for what? Oh, he shot somebody with a sawed-off shotgun. But then I'd be borrowing my mom's BMW to drive to the school. So it was everything just seemed so confusing, and I kind of was just on my own being an adult. And I remember one summer, my friend had an uncle, and he had a charter yacht, and on the weekends he would take people out fishing, tourists out fishing out of Back Bay in Newport, and during the weekdays it was kind of dead, so he would take us out, and we knew that we could go on this boat and ask him for whatever alcohol and or other party favors we wanted, and he would supply that. And so we would go out behind Catalina, jumping off the front of the boat, and in the back of the boat we're catching barracudas, and everybody's drunk and everybody's wasted. And my friend Kelly, she decides that she wants to swim to the back of Catalina because it's a preserve back there. So there's no houses or anything, but you can swim, right? So her and my friend Jackie decide to swim to the back of the Catalina Island to pick up some seashells. And we're just partying on the boat, and it's kind of crazy, and Santana's playing that Samba Pati song, and it's just like very, very cool. But I look over and I see, way off on the horizon, my friend Kelly and Jackie kind of like going that way, horizontal and with the shoreline, and kind of find out they were caught in a riptide. So the guy, the skipper or whatever, he passes out, right? So I'm running down and I'm trying to get her uncle, like, get up here, like, we need to go get Jackie and Kelly. And so we go over there and they're holding on like this. They can't even swim anymore because they're so tired. They almost died, and this is just the beginning, right, of how it goes when you're drinking. So, at 19, it gets too much for me because California is definitely an issue here. So I proceed to get in a physical altercation with my mother in the middle of the street, and I say, F it, I'm out of here. And I pack up, I've emptied my bank account of $350, and I took my Nissan Frontier half-ton truck, and I packed it with a duffel bag, and I called my boss at the time. We would go stand in front of grocery stores and like collect signatures to be able to get initiatives on the ballot. And he's like, I'm in Arizona doing these campaigns. Why don't you come out here? It's like a 3-month gig. At least you'll have money. You can rent a place. And I'm like, how do I rent a place? So we didn't have a cell phone. Yeah, I had to go to the library to use the computer. What do you do? Like look in the classified ads for a roommate? This is a very interesting thing. So I made that decision that night to leave, and I packed up my truck and left the next morning. I proceeded to move 26 times in 13 years. I don't know, you do the math. Like, there was a year where I moved 4 times in 1 year. So that takes care of some of those doubles. I don't know how it happened. Maybe it was 24 times in 13 years. It's either 24 or 26. Needless to say, there was always like, this roommate is the problem, or this Scottsdale's the problem. There's too much cocaine, or Chandler's the problem. It's too boring down there. Or like, this guy's the problem, or, I got to the point where towards the end of my drinking, I was 30 years old. I had just graduated somehow miraculously with a bachelor's degree in media relations, aka propaganda. And I was like kind of out of time and out of steam and all this stuff I was just out of life force, I guess you could say. And so I phoned a friend. I said, hey, I need a place to go. He's like, you can move in with me and my parents. We're 2 acres down here in Chandler. It's like a fortress. So I went down there, got in a fight with his dad at the dinner table, packed up all my stuff, moved to the next door neighbor's house, got kicked out of her house for drinking all her box wine, and ended up with trash bags, crashing on my friend Megan, who we just saw in Flagstaff. She comes home from work, and she's like, what are you doing here? And I'm sitting in her living room with all these trash bags, like, I need a place to crash for a few days. That's how it was, right? Me managing my life into the ground, self-sufficiency, no God involved in that situation at all. And it just got to a point where, I was morally and spiritually bankrupt. I finally got the advertising job that I wanted. I was doing digital advertising for cars and thinking that this was it. As soon as I get this job, it's going to be great. As soon as I move to this condo in Old Town Scottsdale, it's going to be great. As soon as I, get this, it's going to be great. And I got all that stuff, and then it was not great. And I didn't understand what was happening to me. I got fired from that job for drinking Fireballs on lunch, every lunch. And I couldn't even admit that I got fired until like way after my first fifth step too. Like it took me a while to be able to admit that, because my ego wants you to believe that I've got this figured out, that I've got everything under control, right? And so I get this job working marketing email cadences for a software company, and I'm coming in hungover, and I'm working in a cubicle, and it's like very obvious that I'm the only one with this problem in this super quiet software company. It's not like advertising where you have like media coming in with a party bus and saying, you spent $13 million in Auto Trader, we're taking you to the sanctuary. You know, like advertising and software is two different situations. And I got really sick, and they were very, very lenient with their absentee policy. And so I was like, I need to work from home for, a week or two. And this is before work from home was like a thing. And they're like, we don't know what's going on, but I don't know. I just couldn't kick this cold. It's like my immune system had just shut down, and I was like shaking, and I would wake up and feel like I was in a foggy fishbowl, and I would have to take shots of vodka. And I don't know. They say alcoholism is a progressive illness. It gets worse over time. And that's what I learned about my alcoholism. And my friend came over. This friend, we had gotten into so much trouble, so much havoc, so much recklessness. And she had this light in her eye, right? She brought me chicken soup because I was so sick. And she had this light in her eye. And I said, what is it? I was like, what's going on with you? I thought she was on like a new drug or something. I was like, oh, what you got? And she's like, I'm going to AA and I'm going to go get a 90-day chip. Do you want to go see me get a chip? And I'm like, what's a chip? I was like, but I'll go with you to support you. And in the back of my head, I was like, I'll check it out. And I went to this meeting, and it was at like a Catholic church in Thomas Road and 40th Street or something like that. And there was a guy with like a dog there, and kind of, I don't know, just guys that I would see normally at the coach house or like, but they were in a church. And everyone went around and shared, and I noticed myself like, I feel that way. I feel irritable, restless, discontent. I feel like the nerves are on the outside of my body. I feel like that too. And they said, Jenni, do you want to share anything? And I said, come to find out, like, I think I've been drinking and drugging, or drinking only with outside issues for, I don't know, 10 years. And I went home that night, and I looked in the mirror, and I saw for the first time in years the reality of my face. And it was cracked, like dehydrated, cracked. It was gray. It was sunken, empty, hollow eyes. And it was only for like a little second that I had this moment of clarity that I was like, it's been 20 years of drinking, not 10. And I was under such a delusion because this life had become the only life I know, right? I thought that this life was a choice. I wanted to work in event coordination and media relations and this and that because you can drink at lunch and this kind of thing and that kind of thing. I didn't know that I had lost the power of choice in a drink, right? And so at that point, I was dating a guy who was in jail for his 5th DUI. Because I would always date someone a little bit worse off than me, just so like they would be the problem and not me. And so it had gotten to that point where like my next step was probably an institution. And so the person that I was dating was in an institution. And I was so sick, I'd wake up at 4:00 in the morning, go down to Tent City, pick him up, bring him so he could take a shower, pack a lunch, drop him off at his job selling pens, demon dialing for pens. And then show up late to my job, and then leave work early to go pick him up and take him back to Tent City, but on the way, stopped by an AA meeting. And that's how I was 12-stepped into the program. I think it was Tab maybe that told me a while ago, because I was new and a big book thumper, and I've got this program, and I had 6 months under my belt, and I had I was showing up early, and I was wearing a dress to the meeting, and I was good. And I'm like, why don't people get it? And, someone taught me, today, like, people are really bouncing into their bottoms in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not like back in the day where the doctor would say, this person, I think, has a chance of getting sober based on spiritual principles. I'm going to call Bob and Bill, and they're going to come to the hospital, and they're going to sponsor you into the meeting. Like, it doesn't work like that today. We get sent a lot of people that aren't alcoholics, a lot of people with outside issues. And the people in this room, in this closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, they let me sit in this room if I had a desire to stop drinking, and they helped me qualify, right? They helped me qualify. They helped me understand that when I start drinking, I can't stop. And they helped me understand that I'm obsessing about alcohol. And I'm so grateful that they were able to, that they didn't say, you're not an alcoholic, you need to leave. Like, they didn't tell me that. They helped me qualify. They helped to qualify me. So after 30 days of going to meetings and not drinking, I finally said, I'm an alcoholic. And then after 90 days of going to meetings and not drinking, I went up and got that 90-day chip that my friend had gotten so far back. And all I could think about is how I wanted to get a bottle of champagne, take my Honda Accord, drive it 100 and as fast as it could go, 130 miles an hour, up the 101, hit the center median at about 3 a.m. with the windows down and no seatbelt, and make it look like an accident, right? That's me when I go to meetings and don't drink. I was going to die. I was literally sitting in the rooms and I was going to die. And I was sitting there, like spiritual pontification. What does my God look like? Is it Siddhartha? Is it God on a Harley? Is it my dead grandmother? Is it, what is it? And I went to this women's meeting, and women's meetings used to make my skin crawl. But I needed help, and I had gone through 5 sponsors in 90 days, and no one could help me. And, yeah, it's like Goldilocks and the 18 sponsors. And this woman, she spoke with such a conviction. I mean, she was a salesperson, too, in her previous life. And she had talked about something that I hadn't heard yet. Probably people were talking about it, but I hadn't heard it yet. She said she had recovered from alcoholism. And she had been, this is my favorite promise, placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. And in fact, her husband was a normal drinker. And in fact, her husband has alcohol at her house, and she attends happy hours. And she is safe and protected. She does not obsess about alcohol. And she has recovered from alcoholism. And she was shiny and bright and lovely, and I wanted what she had, right? And so I told her that I was going to die if I don't do something else. And so she said, meet me at the coffee spot down the street. And I met her, and, she had this whole list of things. If you want me to sponsor you, you're going to do this, 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 and this. And I was like, at this point, in the state of mind that I was at, I said, I'm going to give this lady 6 months to fix my life, and if she doesn't, I'm going to fire her. 6 months to sweep up 20 years of wreckage. Like, get on it. And it's on her, too. It's not on me at this point. Like, I mean, she claimed to have these answers, so I was like holding her to it. So I did this whole situation. I joined this home group. We had a lot of customs that not all of Alcoholics Anonymous practices. And for me, that's what I needed, because I was so noisy in my mind. I needed discipline, right? I was so undisciplined. I needed discipline. And, you know, after 18 months, couple years, you know, I needed another come to believe moment, right? Because I had come to believe that maybe, just maybe, if it worked for this lady, it could work for me. And I made a decision to do the steps. But largely, I was still an agnostic in this situation. But I went through the motions and I did the steps, you know, and when I made amends to my mom, like I hadn't forgiven her yet, right? But I did it anyways because I was willing to go any lengths to recover from alcoholism. And I had met this new sponsor, Tracy, down in Ahwatukee, Tracy and Gary N. And she said, "What's your relationship with God?" And I was baffled. Like at 18 months, 2 years sober, I was baffled by this question. I said, well, I wake up in the morning, I read pages 86 and 87, I get down on my knees, I say the third step prayer, and then I go about my day. Like, that's it, you know? And she's like, that's not a relationship, you know, like, that's not a relationship. So she really, really took me back through the steps and said, how are we going to define your relationship with God? And I'm like, I don't know, because I don't really even believe in it. You know, I believe, but I don't believe. And then all of a sudden, you know, in the reading that I read, it says, and miraculous demonstrations start to appear in our life. Like through the process of these steps, like I had seen all of these miracles occurring, and they were happening all along the way, my entire life, but I didn't have the right lens, right? And I think what I really want to say here is that, you know, Tracy helped me go back too and realize that she had discovered that cult that my mom was in was a cult called al-Anon, and it was put together by a guy named Chuck Diedrich, who left Alcoholics Anonymous in 1954 to kind of do his own thing and build his own rehab program. And I learned a lot about like the psychological things that my mom went through. And I was able to come to like a deeper understanding of how she grew up, and that generational stuff that gets passed down was a lot easier to kind of forgive, right? And today, you know, is a different topic, but it's about learning how to forgive, but also do things that are respectful for them and safe for me, right? And so I got to travel a lot in early sobriety, and I would go to Southern California a lot, and I fell in love with this book study, or not a book study, but I would go to this meeting called the Bellflower Big Book Group, and it was freaking awesome, right? And I had known so many people that went there because I had a service commitment at the Saturday Night Speaker, and they would come out here. So going there, it was very like, it felt good because I knew people. And I was sitting there in line for coffee, and I was talking to this lady, and her name was Michelle L. And all of a sudden, her sponsee comes running up to her and hugs her. And it's my friend Kelly from the ocean. And I was like, huh? You know? And the first thing I said to her, I was like, Kelly, I owe you an amends. Like, and I was like, what are you doing here? And so we got together for dinner, and we connected and we bonded, and like, that is a miraculous demonstration. Like how we didn't even grow up. I mean, Bellflower is like north. It's like in LA County. Like we're in Orange County down south. So this is not just like a circumstance. Like this is a miraculous demonstration of God. And you know what I'm like today, right? This is the part that I don't usually talk about because it's too vulnerable, right? I don't like to talk about current events because it's still new. But when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically, and I believe that I had a spiritual experience as a result of doing the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then it tells me that I'm going to take this new God consciousness and go into the world and kind of trial and error it. And I was trying so hard to be like rigid and never make a mistake. And I'm going to write a step 10. I'm going to find out my character defects. I'm going to ask God to remove it. Blah, blah, blah. And, I meet this guy in Alcoholics Anonymous, and his name's Ruben. And, and at the time my sponsor was like, why don't you try doing some practice dating? So I'm like, all right. I watch this guy, he comes in and he's got 3 little kids like running around him, and but everyone loves him and he's really nice to everybody. And so I'm like, well, we can practice date, So we'd meet at a location and have yogurt and then go home. And then it progresses to, he's going to stop by my house, pick me up, take me on a date, drop me off at home, and leave, And we did that for a long time, and we did that, and we got to know each other, and we did this thing called a values list together, because in the book it tells us we cannot fool ourselves about our values if we want to be successful. And so we write down, I was like, I want a monogamous relationship. Like, I had never been able to say, I want a monogamous relationship. I would just assume that's what's happening, impose my values on this relationship, and get super mad if you didn't follow my rules inside of my head. And apparently that's not what you're supposed to do in relationships. And that's probably why I never had any successful relationships. And so, in the beginning of our dating, my husband is a commercial electrical contractor, so the majority of his time is spent at like playgrounds with his then 8, 9, and 15-year-old, and school functions, and then electrical contracting. So I wanted to buy him a suit because they said in this program, you're going to go to a lot of weddings and funerals. A lot of weddings and funerals. And I can tell you today that my husband and I have been to a lot of weddings and funerals. And he talked about that a little bit last month. We went to a wedding recently of one of his sponsees, and when I first met this sponsee, his name is Justin, Ruben and I had gotten to the part where he was picking me up with his kids, and then we would all go on a date together, and then him and his kids would drop me off. And so on this particular date, we were going to go to the Valley Alano Club because all the kids go there in the morning, and they were going to go to breakfast afterwards and go to the park. So they picked me up. And then he's like, hold on, we got to pick somebody up. And we like pull over on the side of the road. And this guy comes from the sidewalk and just jumps in the car. We're like, who's this guy? Justin. That's the first time I met him. Fast forward, he's like sober for years and years. He's a part of our home group today. He got married. He just welcomed his first child into this thing. But when we went to this wedding, they sat us at the table with like the pastor, because all the other people were drinking, and we got to have these like spiritual conversations. But then Justin's mom like pulls us off to the side in the middle of this wedding, and she goes, I just want to thank God for you, Ruben, for saving my child's life, and I want you to know that I pray for your family every day. And just this idea that Harold touched on, the ripple effect of this program and how it affects people. We're not self-sufficient in here. There are people praying for us that we don't even know are praying for us. We have created a ripple effect, And, yesterday we got to see Jimmy marry his mama. And we got to see Jimmy walk through that with integrity and grace. When I met Jimmy, he came over to my house, and it was like Saturday morning, and it was like 8:30 in the morning, 9 o'clock. And I'm sitting on the couch with my stepdaughter, who was like 12 at the time, and us girls, we wake up slow on Saturdays. You know, we like to chill, take our time, you know. And this guy, he's like, I had seen him like at Calvary and then seen his letters coming from the jail. And then he's like at my house, he's like, you girls need to get up and get dressed and get to work. And I'm like, Ruben, I don't want that guy over here in the morning anymore. Like, and that guy today, he's our family member. You know, he's Uncle Jimmy at our house. And like, he walks with such integrity and grace. And like, I got to see him be a leader in his family and be a pillar for his father and not get sucked up into all the family drama that comes with high stress and emotional environments like that. You know, and that is a direct result of Alcoholics Anonymous. And like, that is the kind of stuff that brings us joy today. You know, Ruben and I wanted to get married. I was $50,000 in credit card debt, and he had some, you know, student loans, and he was renting a house, and we had no idea how to move forward with joining our finances, with blending families and all this stuff. So we got outside help. You know, we went to a program that taught us how to get through. It's another 12-step thing that taught us how to get through that and how to get through our debt and find out how to join our finances so that we could be successful. Because Ruben and I don't come from families with healthy backgrounds. We come from dysfunctionality. We come from weird families of origin, you know, all the things. And so we're literally sitting here against all odds, trying to, number one, stay sober, trying to, number two, blend a family with stepchildren, and number three, deal with, you know, kind of wreckage of our past, right? And that's literally all the odds are against us, but with God, all things are possible. With God, all things are possible, and I have to believe in that. And I love so much how Mike talked about my favorite line in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The verdict of the ages is that all men of faith have courage, right? And it's true. It comes right after the fear inventory. It's like you have to walk through that fear to get to that courage, you know? And Ruben and I, we walked through that fear and we got to that courage and we hit walls, you know, and I'm telling you, we had this like big engagement roast and all these family, you know, Randy and Tess were there and so many people were there. And like, I'll tell you, this engagement roast that we did, we put it on, we did like a potluck. It was $500 total all in cost. And like, we had somebody sign our paperwork, and we didn't do a big wedding because we had financial goals that we wanted a house, you know? And so, this is not the point of the story. The point of the story is, you know, this roast, like Ruben's got, you know, with kids, like you never know what's going to happen, and something happened and they're not there. And I'm like just angry, you know, and I'm like at my own engagement party dressed in my dress and I'm setting up everything and I'm like, where's Ruben? And I'm just angry, you know, at 5 years sober. And I'm at my engagement party and I'm like, something is not like congruent here. And I knew then that I needed outside help, you know, and I needed to learn about other programs. And so I met a new AA sponsor that also had experience in other programs and really had to kind of take a look at what was happening because, you know, the promises do come true. And then I'm in this way of life, like testing out my God consciousness and asking God to remove defects of character, having areas of life, you know, being a stepmom in areas that I had never even had before, right? Like how to be a stepmom, right? And these kids and what they have taught me about God is so incredible, right? It's so incredible. You know, his oldest son, Trey, was 15 when I moved in, and I didn't try to be a mom to him. I left him, you know, to do his thing and kind of gave him his space and his boundaries. And, you know, Trey needed help, and Trey was kind of like in this, I met him right in the beginning of his like teenage rebellion stage. And, I had to make an amends to him, right? Because he had brought like pot or something to the house, and I'm like, 2 or 3 years sober. And so this is like a tragic event for me to have drugs in my sober household, so dramatic. And this kid's like 16, and he was being a 16-year-old, and I locked him out of his own house. And I said, don't bring drugs into my home, young man. And I don't know if you guys know this, but that's illegal. And I had to, make amends for that. I had to go back when things settled down and he became an adult and he got through his stages, and I had to sit down with him and say, I overreacted. I was pushing my stuff onto you, and I don't want to do that in your life anymore, and I'm sorry. And he respected that, and later on in life when things were going on, he questioned some things that were going on. I said, Trey, you know me, and you know that I will admit when I'm wrong. And he said, you're right. And so that gave me like some credit, some future credit. And then with Taryn, like each kid has a little piece of my heart in a different way. And each kid has shown me things about God in a different way. And Taryn, she, our birthdays are a week apart. We're just Spitfire. She's Spitfire. I'm Spitfire. And, we had, and she's female and I'm female. And so it's a different dynamic, with teenage girls. But eventually she needed help. Eventually she came to a point where she needed help in her life, and she came to us and she said, I see you guys and you guys know about recovery and I need help and I want to tell you this. And the fact that we were there to be able to shepherd her into her path of her own recovery, and the fact that she came to us, is just something that God and Alcoholics Anonymous taught our family. And then Tyson's the little one. He's the little one. He's 6'4" and like 195 pounds at this point, and a tight end on his varsity football team. But this little one, I met him when he was 8. And he took this woman who I was so crusty, I was so closed off. I was so rigid. I was so scripted. I had this is my travel uniform. This is what I do at the meeting. This is what I do here. And he just chipped away at all that and opened my heart right open. He's like a stage 5 clinger with the cuddles, and I'm like, what is this cuddling? What is this? But I learned through him, and he would be off the walls bouncing, wanting to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. What are we going to do? We're going to go to the park. We're going to do. And I'd be like, I need to have coffee and prayer meditation. Otherwise I'm going to be super cranky. And he was like, well, I want to do it with you. And I was like, well, if you're going to sit in here with me, then you're going to have to do prayer and meditation too. And he's like, okay. So they have these little books like for kids, and it's like a boy's guide to daily prayer and meditation. So he had his book and I had my book, and he did that for like 2 days. But after we drove up to Pine Top yesterday and attended Jimmy's mom's funeral, we drove down from Pine Top, and then we drove over to Tullison to go see Tyson as a starting tight end, and they won like 54-0 yesterday. But no, it wasn't yesterday. It was last week. They did the opener in Flagstaff, and we were so excited because Tyson's been doing football for 9 years, and through this whole process, he's worked really, really hard. So to see him start in his varsity year in a Flagstaff, it's just huge for our family. And I got chills. But what happens is we go there and they all come running out and they're jumping up and down and they're so excited. And then you see like 3 kids over here kneeling to pray. And then you see Tyson, and he's like, come on, guys. And like literally more than half of their team went over there in this huge circle and prayed up before the game. And Tyson was encouraging them to come over. And so seeing the ripple effect of Alcoholics Anonymous and planting a seed, it's tedious, but now coming on 10 years sober, it's like we're starting to get to see the harvest, right? And no. Cling to the idea that in God's hands, your darkest past will be, the best asset for others. With this, you can help them avoid misery and death. And I just want to say that if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, please stay. Please continue to be willing. Please be honest with yourself. And please be open-minded to the process. I'll pass.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.